we'll just start with the one that literally dropped minutes before we just hopped on here, Chris. Nakai Hill-Green has entered the transfer portal. He will have 2 years of eligibility remaining. A guy that, I think I did something on the magazine on him. I think you did something in the magazine on him. He's a guy both of us spoke to after the spring game, and someone that I thought was going to be a big factor in this competition at linebacker as they find out who's going to be that guy that starts next to Junior Colson. But he is elected to move on. The transfer portal window is wide open as of now. This one's, I won't say, nothing surprises me anymore, Chris, but this one, given the momentum that felt like he had a good spring, he looked good in the spring game. He sounded like a guy that was committed to the process of continuing to compete and get better. This one kind of caught me off guard. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was right before we went on, but surprised by this one.
It looked good-ish, I thought, in the spring game. There was one time when Matt Hibner caught across a pass across the middle of tight end and ran away from him. And I'm thinking, in the past, Nakai Hill-Green, man, you know what? That's not happening to him. And there were some issues, I thought. Jesse Minter, Michigan's defensive coordinator, went on the In the Trenches podcast with John Jansen, and he said, he still has some work to get back as a football player to where he was. And when you've got guys like Ernest Hausman playing incredible football, which he was in the spring and in the spring game, the transfer from Nebraska, you've got Michael Barrett back for his 6th year. You've got Junior Colson coming back. That's 3 guys. And I think Nakai Hill-Green, honestly, was 4th on that list. So they're losing some backups here. When you look at the other guys they lost, AJ Henning, you know what? It's like, is he going to catch some balls this year? And he hasn't really in his first 3 years. They were using him as a reverse guy and as a return guy. You can find another return guy. So with Nakai, though, to me, it's unfortunate because Jim Harbaugh was talking about how athletic he was, AB, and how he could be one of those guys right there next to Junior Colson as part of an unbelievable tandem. And then he had a soft tissue injury. We don't know what it is, maybe a hamstring or something like that never really healed properly, and he never really came all the way back. But I did think he was going to stick it out in talking to him after the spring game. So you hate to see these guys leave because you know what? That's quality depth. No, he wasn't a starter, but it's quality depth. And now, you know what? You're going a little bit deeper into your depth chart to get there. Plus, he's a great kid. Really enjoyed talking to him and wish him all the best wherever he ends up.
Yeah, I want to preface all of these transfers really by the fact that this isn't like it was a couple of years ago where guys are transferring out and the social media uproar would be, oh my gosh, what's going on at Michigan? Is Jim Harbaugh losing control of the program? You have these guys that were contributors or promising that are moving on. To me, this is a testament to their depth and all of these positions that we'll talk about here. But, namely at linebacker, Ernest Hausman wasn't brought in to be put on ice and then, I know he was just a freshman last year, but maybe he pays off 2 years down the road or whatever. No, he's going to play this year, and he's one of their better linebackers already. Michael Barrett, 6-year guy, has been a steady riser over the last few years. You've got Junior Colson. You've got those younger guys like Jimmy Rolder. So yeah, it's on paper. I feel like we talked about this a couple weeks ago where, the pros and the cons of being so deep and so loaded at every position are that, obviously you have options there. If a guy goes down, they survived last year when Nakai Hill-Green went down. The con to it is you can't hoard everyone, and sometimes culture and championship aspirations aren't enough to do that. So I'll say this about all 3 guys. I mean, they all good guys, all played critical roles in this team's turnaround in the last 3 years, and you wish them all well.
Yeah, and the portal is this is what is made for these guys, right? I think at least 2 that they're probably going to leave with their Michigan degrees. A lot of these kids are finishing up their degrees in 3 years and working over the summer, which is great. AJ Henning was one of the nicest kids I ever talked to. I went to the camp that JJ McCarthy ran in Chicago last year, and just down to earth. And I'm thinking, man, I really hope this kid has a great career, And he, he will have memories that will last forever. That first touchdown against Ohio State in the game that got them over the hump. This kid was fantastic in that game. So he just wasn't the receiver that I think a lot of people thought he could be. When you're that small, you've got to be more explosive, twitchier, and he just wasn't. But I give him all the credit in the world for sticking it out. There have been rumblings, the last few years before that maybe he would go, but he stuck it out. I think he's going to get his degree, and I wish him all the best, man. A great kid. With R.J. Moten, I don't think R.J. Moten played in the TCU game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was, down a ways on the depth chart. It's funny how you read some of these headlines on social media. Michigan devastated by loss of, starter or something like that. Well, he wasn't a starter anymore. Nakai Page had passed him up. And you got some young guys in Zeke Berry and Keon Sabb and others that are really pressing him for time. Moten was kind of a tweener. He was kind of more like in the Viper mold of the old Don Brown defenses. And they actually played him at linebacker, AB, at the Fiesta Bowl, and practiced him there a little bit. So, but again, another kid who really helped change the course of the program. We wish him all the best and hope he kills it wherever he goes. Unless, of course, it's Michigan State or Ohio State or something. But we don't anticipate that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like with a lot of these guys, either going back home or going to familiar spots is in play. I wonder with a guy like Hill Green, is that another Biff Poggi type of addition? We'll see.
Interesting, yeah.
So who knows? I'll start with Moten. I wrote about this earlier today. You can check it out over on the Wolverine.com when it was just the two guys that transferred out. But not a lot of surprise for me with Moten deciding to move on. I think, as you said, we saw Nakai Page pass him on the depth chart, and those snaps kind of went down throughout the year. So I think something with this Michigan secondary that we've seen is, an emphasis on versatility. Now, RJ Moten can be versatile in that, okay, maybe he's more of a traditional guy that plays in the box and can play a little bit of linebacker. But, I think they want to be able to mix up the coverages a little bit and move guys around in situations like that. So I think Nakai Page clearly was a guy that passed him. Rod Moore had long passed him, probably closer to 2 years ago. But I think it's the Zeke Berry. That's the name right there. I mean, we saw him talk about guys that had a good spring game. I mean, he's a guy who, even going back to watch his high school tape, he's a ball hawk and someone who can play it. He can play deep safety. He can step up and play the nickel, similarly to how Dax Hill did. Not saying that's his ceiling, but when you look at the role and the archetypes. So I think that he's a guy he's probably the biggest beneficiary of a spot opening up on the depth chart, so to speak. Keon Sabb, another one. I think both of those guys are going to be they'll be fixtures here before too long. It's going to take, they're just so deep there right now. Henning at wide receiver, again, another guy where the writing may have been on the wall. Again, he was just kind of a gadget guy at Michigan. I think it was kind of telling, and don't get me wrong, had one of the biggest plays of that Ohio State game in 2021. It returned punts at an all Big Ten level the last 2 years. We'll talk about that in a second, but there were times last season where I felt like we came on these shows and we said this offense needs to find ways to be a little more explosive. And the fact that he wasn't really able to be the solution in that, I think that was pretty telling. He's just kind of an athlete. He's not a crisp route runner. He doesn't have great hands. I know there was a ton of, Deebo Samuel-esque hype last year, but they're not even the same body type. I mean, Deebo Samuel is a running back playing wide receiver. So, and you add in the fact that Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson are at the top of the depth chart, Darius Clemens, Tyler Morris, and now Peyton O'Leary are guys that are competing in that next tier. I mean, again, this is logical from that perspective, but I think where his, I want to camp out here for a second. I think where Henning's transfer is the most, quote unquote, interesting is it kind of opens things up at the punt return job. And that's been a circus for Michigan at times. When Ronnie Bell tore his ACL in 2021, they went a couple weeks where Caden Colastar was back there just fair catching the ball because he was the only guy on the roster that could do that for them. It took time for them to find someone. So, I mean, when you look at contenders to fill that, I mean, I could see a scenario where Roman Wilson does both. Iman Dennis is a guy that has, been active in those battles. I think I might throw a little log on the Samaj Morgan fire. I think he's a guy capable of doing that. Watched him a few times in person, and he does everything on the field, and I think he returns punts really well. I wouldn't be surprised to see him be in that battle All of those freshmen, and then maybe if Cole Cabana comes back healthy, he works into that mix. But things are kind of wide open there, and special teams and that return game. We talk about a Michigan program that plays so much ball control and field position, and how you flip the field is not only how successfully your punter is doing, but also getting those yards in the return game as well. So that's a wide open battle, and something I think it's now one of the bigger storylines heading into fall camp.
I'd be surprised if it were a true freshman, unless it's pretty special. I think Donovan Peoples-Jones did it his freshman year. Caden Colsar will probably be back from that knee injury, right? And maybe he'll be back in the mix. He didn't do it extremely well when he was in there. He let a couple get over his head a couple of times. He might have been the guy that could catch the ball, but he wasn't looking to do anything with it. So and on a team when you have this many athletes, there's got to be somebody out there that can be a weapon. You aren't looking for the safety squeeze here, the safe play. You're looking for somebody who can help you in big games. I can go back and we can go back forever. Desmond Howard in the big game, the Ohio State games. Charles Woodson, Ted Ginn Jr. against Michigan. So what AJ Henning was Calvin Bell back in the day, probably before your time. He was your reverse guy. You know what? Once in a while, he might catch a pass, but and I am not disparaging this kid at all in saying that. I hope he goes somewhere and catches 1,000 yards and passes. Again, unless it's down the road or Ohio State, but that's not going to happen. So wish him all the best. And we'll see. Now you move on. There are going to be others in the portal, the AB that are coming on. A couple of these guys were not guys that I thought. In fact, one of our insiders was actually at a signing where Henning was a couple weeks ago or last week, and he said, "I'm surprised to see you here," because there were rumors then that he was leaving. I was, "Oh, why? I'm still here." And then a week later, he's not. So I think a lot of these guys want to make sure that they're graduating first and get their stuff done, and then that was it. So, but good luck to them all, and we'll see who follows, who's next.
Yeah, and that's an important thing to note as well. A lot of people have asked why now? Why wouldn't it happen?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't it happen closer to the spring game? The transfer portal window for football did reopen in I think it was last week to 10 days or so. So that's why there's going to be more movement there. And again, we're not going to speculate on names. I think if you go by position and look at guys in the archetype of players that have already left, the guys that we just talked about, I think you can kind of draw conclusions on your own. But I guess the question here for you, Chris, is in terms of that position group where we could see guys leave. I mean, is it? I've got a guy or two at running back I could see. I wouldn't be surprised to see some movement at tight end or at quarterback. Offensive line is the one that sticks out like a sore thumb to me. I think you have at least 2 or 3 guys that won't even be in the 2 deep that I think could start at other Big Ten schools. So
Yep.
In terms of those positions, I mean, what are you kind of honing in on what we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think you're right. And then potentially another linebacker, potentially another receiver, so potentially a quarterback. That depth chart's getting pretty long there at quarterback. So I think you hit them all. And it wouldn't surprise me. What would surprise me is something like corner, where you got 3 or 4 guys vying for playing time. Back to the punt returner though, we forgot about Mike Sainristil too, who was back there. I think he fumbled one against Penn State, if I'm not mistaken, in 2000. Was it hit off his knee? And was that him back there, Sainristil? Yeah, I think so. Maybe somebody out there can help me out with that one. I've tried to block that mini season out of my memory, kind of like we were talking about the Rich Rodriguez era the other day, and thinking
at first you said the year 2000. I'm like, I know he's been there.
I'm sorry, 2020. Yeah, 2020. That's what I meant. So, yeah. So anyway, regardless, there will be some more attrition, and some people are going to try to frame it as, oh my God, what's going on at Michigan, which is stupid. It's basically you're not losing any starters. You're losing guys who understand that they aren't going to play as much as they hoped.
Yeah, the guys that I think will leave will be the guys that we more or less kind of expect to leave, and you would love to see stay. But your stars are your stars. I don't think the expectations and what they are building to are too high to lose someone of I won't say significance, but one of your heavy hitters.